followed by East Turkestan National Anthem. To we ask just 5 minutes. So first of all, I would like to invite Mr. Saleh Hudair, founder of ETNA, Minister of East Turkestan Government in Exile. Thank you.
International Human Rights Day, selected by the UN on the day that the UN put forth the International Declaration or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 71 years of Chinese communist occupation, and East Turkestan has had no human rights or freedoms under the Chinese communist regime. Today, millions of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples are currently locked up in concentration camps and prisons. People are being killed for their organs. Their bodies are being cremated in high-tech crematoriums where the smoke is not detected. According to investigative journalist Ethan, China has been harvesting annually over the past few years over 25,000 organs from Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. In addition to this, the Chinese government, with the rule of the CCP, has been using Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples as slave labor. Unfortunately, American companies like Apple, Nike, Coca-Cola, and many others are complicit. In fact, not only are they complicit, They are lobbying against our bill that is sitting in the Senate at this present moment. We urge the U.S. Congress to urgently pass the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. We urge American and non-American companies across the world to uphold their commitments towards human rights by not being complicit in China's forced labor and slave labor programs. What is happening in East Turkestan is no doubt a genocide. People are being forcibly indoctrinated in concentration camps. Women are being sterilized. Children, in fact, over 3.7 million babies were forcibly aborted by the Chinese Communist government between 1979 and 2009. And even since then, they have still continued their forced abortion campaigns against East Turkestan's population. 500,000 children have been forcibly separated from their families, from their parents, and sent to state-run orphanages, boarding schools. Chinese communist citizens. People are dying in these concentration camps. That's why they have crematorias, in East Turkestan that are for organs only. All of this is genocide as defined under the UN Genocide Convention. The Senate last month, actually October, introduced a resolution to China's atrocities against Uyghur and other Turkic peoples in East Turkestan as a genocide. We urge the whole of the U.S. Congress to urgently support this bill and to pass it as soon as possible. We urge the U.S. government, Secretary Pompeo, President Trump, to recognize the genocide. China is not a state, nor is it a single country. Rather, it is an evil empire built on the conquest of its neighbors that is ruled by the CCP criminal. China and its CCP pose not only a threat to those under its tyranny, but to the entire world. With the deliberate spread of the CCP virus, which has killed over 1.5 people across the world, CCP has killed over, and they speak. No one is safe here in the U.S. from the Chinese communist regime. The U.S. and the whole world must work to dissolve this national criminal organization called Chinese Empire. Ask Congress Scott and the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. The U.S. must take stronger actions to hold China and its Communist Party accountable. We urge the United States to treat on par with the we urge to pass a bill recognizing East Turkestan as an independent country that is occupied by China. East Turkestan is formerly known as the East Turkestan Republic up until December 22nd, 1949, when the Chinese communists invaded and overthrew it. It has since been called Xinjiang, or what would translate as the New Territory. We urge the White House to formally meet with the East Turkestan government in exile, like it did with the Tibetan government in exile, and work to end this 21st century Holocaust like genocide. America must acknowledge East Turkestan and its people's strong desire to restore their independence. We cannot or safeguard our human rights and existence without resistance. Lastly, I would like to announce your solidarity with victims of China and its Communist Party, especially those in East Turkestan who are facing genocide. Let's make 2021 the end of the CCP and the evil PRC empire. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's make 2021 the year that East Turkestan, Tibet, South Mongolia, and Hong Kong regain their independence. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Jason Jones, movie producer, founder of Movie to the Movement, and the president and co-founder of Vulnerable People's Project.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be with you here today. It's not only International Human Rights Day, it's another important day. It's my daughter. She has a play. I have 8 children. I lost my first daughter. This thing doesn't like me. There we go. Thank you. I have 8 children. I lost my first child to violence when I was a young father. And when I had to tell my daughter why I wouldn't be here today, why I would miss her play, it's the first time I've missed anything any of my children have ever done. I said, Princess, I'm going to go speak today in Washington, D.C. because there are countless thousands of young girls whose fathers were taken from them by the CCP, and they will never see them again. So this is the only reason I would miss her play. We have to remember that the first victims of CCP were the Chinese people. First, they robbed them of their culture. Then they robbed them of their ancestors. Then through forced abortions, they stole their posterity. They're doing the same things to the people of East Turkestan, the people of Tibet. In my work in Africa and Asia, they're doing the same things to the vulnerable in the countries around the world. And through the CCP virus, they're doing it to us. I'm here because I'm a Catholic, and I think it's a grave scandal that Pope Francis has yet to condemn China for the genocide in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan. I'm here to call on my Pope. It is my faith that taught me that we're to stand with the vulnerability, especially when it costs, especially when there's risk. And we all know that when powerful people stand up to China, stand up to the CCP, there are costs. Pope Francis, it is a scandal, and you're embarrassing Catholics around the world. You're embarrassing us. Not just Pope Francis, but the silence of the US CCB and celebrity bishops like Bishop Barron. You've been silent too long. It is time to speak. I am also here because as an American, I have no choice but to participate in this genocide. Every time I hold my iPhone, I ask myself, what were the conditions of those who worked in the mines for the rare earth minerals that went into this product? Those who assembled it. When I open the box and I look at it, I say, who touched this? Who put it in the box? Were they slaves? Did they suffer from forced labor? I'm here to call on Apple, Nike, Costco, and all of those corporations that are profiting off of genocide. Rather than spend hundreds of thousands of dollars lobbying Congress to gut the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, look into yourself. Spend hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting it. Hold a press conference. Change your position. I want to be proud of our products. I want to be proud of our brands. During the Cold War, there was the free world versus the totalitarian socialist world. Today, it's a little more complex. There are those of us who are willing to live a life in solidarity with the vulnerable, and those of us who are willing to profit off of their exploitation. The French anthropologist René Girard said, when you stand with the vulnerable, you become indistinguishable to the person you're standing with, to those doing violence from them, to them. And I want to say it goes the other way. When you persecute the vulnerable, when you exploit the vulnerable, when you take advantage of the vulnerable, Nike, Costco, Apple, I see the CCP. I see the CCP. So, when I look at you, I see the CCP. I pray by the grace of God, when the CCP looks at me, they see the Uyghur. God bless you. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Sean Lin, Executive Director of Truth Warriors Alliance.
Thank you. And today, December 10th, sounds good? All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Sean Lin. I'm the Executive Director of the Truth Warriors Alliance. And today, December 10th, is a World Human Rights Day declared by United Nations. But now, when I think about United Nations, I'm upset because the Chinese Communist regime is sitting in the Human Rights Council. What a shame. Right? What a shame. Together with China sitting on the Human Rights Council, the Venezuela's, North Korea's. We in the world, we're facing such a situation that CCP's infiltration is everywhere. Very few blocks away from here, there's a small statue. It's a Victims of Communist Memorial statue there. It's such a small presence, kind of symbolize what we are facing right now. The whole world didn't realize how widespread the CCP infiltration has been, how much influence there has been in the global world. And in that small square, it documented with just a few pictures. More than 100 million people have died unnaturally in the last century under the communist dictatorship in so many different countries. But the massacre, the genocide, has not stopped yet. As Sally just mentioned about organ harvesting, and this large-scale genocide of innocent Chinese people, especially prisoners of conscience, including Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, has been ongoing for more than 2 decades. How can the whole world turn a blind eye to this genocide? When we turn a blind eye to this genocide, Chinese make it industrial-wise, and they make it a chain production. Every innocent prisoners in China, even now, any citizen who got their health information collected by the Chinese government can be put into their organ bank. It's a live organ bank the Chinese government collected using their big data technology. They can put all this data into this big database. And anyone go to China to have organ transplant, or maybe some of the elites inside China want to have organ transplant, they can quickly search this database. They can identify who matched the tissue type, who matched the blood type, and they can go to this labor camp, detention center, they can kill you and then make profit from your organs. And that's why they have the express lanes in the airports in Xinjiang area. It's especially designed for organ transport. And such a lucrative business nationwide and then running rapidly globally. And then United Nations still help covering it. United Nations established a task force, especially for organ transplant. But in this task force, they put Chinese doctor on it, 2 Chinese doctors, and both of them seriously engaged in organ harvesting, especially Dr. Huang Jiefu. He himself conducted hundreds of cases of organ transplant. They call it organ transplant, but it basically is organ genocide. Chinese government is very good at disguising this genocide, and they use the UN as a cover-up, just like they cover up the COVID-19, the disaster from China. But WHO, the UN helped covering it, and we're facing this kind of situation. So I think the World Human Rights Day should not be just one day. If we think about the crime, the Communist Party doing it, so many people dying inside China and still dying every day. Everybody should step forward to call what CCP, what it is. It's a transnational criminal organization. And the whole world need to speak up to designate CCP as transnational criminal organization, not just the United States. And right now we see the sign, stop the steal. This is CCP's dark force behind these forces that try to support the United States election systems. We see the connection between the Dominion system with Chinese government. We see the connection between Biden's family with Chinese government. Right? We see the typical Chinese propaganda machines, textbook tactics. That's why YouTube censor all this information. They know how to censor by following CCP's textbook, right? Censor all the voice that criticize the election fraud. So we see the CCP's influence everywhere. In the past, we will see the victims, it's only the Chinese people. But now, actually, I think everyone in the world, people in the United States, also suffer from the CCP's influence. Because the communism basically has 2 forces. One is violent force, one is non-violent force. And in the Western world, we most times didn't realize the non-violent forms of communism is having a detrimental effect in the society. And the big tech, the social media are being influenced by the Chinese Communist Party, and then they learn their tactics and then how to control the public opinion, how to censor the critical voice. This is basically Chinese Communist Party textbook. And if we know that we are all victims under the communist influence. So I think everyone needs to step forward. We need to call out strongly. We need to stop the steal. We need to designate CCP as a transnational criminal organization. And we need to unite it together. This is a biblical war, not just a domestic one. We are fighting enemies, domestic and foreign. I think everyone has this duty. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Eugene, U.S. Army veteran and activist.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Eugene Yu from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. And also, it is a great honor that I stand before you this morning. We are talking about December 10, which is today is UN recognizes the International Human Rights Day. Are you kidding? I want to say to the UN, what are you guys doing for the last 30, 40 years? Just don't do anything. Just spending money. Just like our Congress. Sit back there and do nothing. Just spending our money. It is time to do something. As a people cry for your help. People, can't you see that today, the 21st century, still genocide is going on? And how can you guys go to sleep at night? Tell your families that love. Same time that all the people dying and killed. Look around. We all look different. Our differences, our diversity is the strength of America. Regardless where you come from, whatever your race, we all are American. Whether you're tall, short, fat, skinny, woman, whatever religious, we all are American. Some American complaining about America. Let me tell you one thing. We have democracy. We have a freedom. We are far, far better off than being anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Our ancestors came this land several hundred years ago, looking for, searching for freedom, sweat and blood. They're working so hard to build this great nation and give us this great nation. It is our responsibility to give this great nation to the next generation. Are you agree?
We're with you.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Talking about the amen. I bet every one of them, you guys like the dollar, right? Dollar bill.
Right.
In this U.S. dollar, in the backside, in God we trust. In God we trust. Whether you are Christian or not, as long as you use U.S. dollar, you have to believe in God we trust. Talking about the CCP. I don't have no problem with the Chinese. But I hate Chinese Communist Party. Especially that Xi Jinping, which is 21st century, that we're creating Frankenstein style of a monster, which we let them just do whatever he wants. We cannot tolerate it. We cannot tolerate it. By the way, that Xi Jinping have his little brother living in the North Korea called Kim Jong-un. And he also, Xi Jinping just adopted the stepbrother in the South Korean, that socialist Moon Jae-in, which he is a strictly socialist and communist. He's a sympathizer to North Korea. He's trying everything to go around our back. You know, so many other countries, always, whenever they're in trouble, they're always asking for help. We as Americans, we gave the help. We helped. We not only helped them, we gave the blood. Soon their problem goes away, they forget about us. They forget about us, and they turn around, they talk bad about us. This Xi Jinping and this CCP, this Chinese Communist Party, they infiltrated, manipulating our voting machine and tried to undermine the American, then make all this trouble with our election system. I know the good Lord always, God bless America. It is a good time to Donald Trump, which is my president. He will kick the Xi Jinping's butt all the way. At the same time, Mr. President, if you hear us, please look out for what Eastern Turkestan and the Uyghur. Eastern Pakistan, okay. I have a hard to pronunciate the Uyghur. We as a Korean American, we always call Uyghur. Well, anyway. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And God bless each and every one of you. And may God bless continuously United States of America.
God bless America!
God bless America!
God bless America!
And now I would like to invite Faith McDonald, Director of Religious Liberty Programs at the Institute on Religion and Democracy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Faith McDonald from the Institute on Religion and Democracy. Those things go together sometimes, and we want them to forever. First of all, I want to thank everyone here, especially my friend Sally, for inviting me to speak. I want to thank all of the people who represent those who are being marginalized, persecuted, and slaughtered by the Chinese Communist Party for your courage, for your faithfulness, for what you are doing. You have opened our eyes. You have shown us how to respond when there is genocide going on, when there is injustice going on. You have helped us to see that, and I thank you, and I'm proud to stand with you. Every year, I usually, in a lot warmer weather than this, speak at the rally with the Falun Gong people as well. And we've been talking about organ harvesting. We've been talking about East Turkestan and what is taking place in East Turkestan and in Tibet and everywhere that the Chinese Communist Party is putting its claws. When there is injustice going. And I'm hearing myself. I don't usually get to hear my own voice. That's great. But China is doing the same thing in Africa. China is trying to take over Africa. So that's why also I want to thank those who are bringing forth legislation. I'm a Christian. I also stand with the Christians in China who are being persecuted. Both now the underground, unregistered churches and the registered churches. Xi Jinping is doing unbelievable things now, that more than has ever been done before. And I brought with me some buttons that have Merry Christmas on them in Chinese characters. We made these years ago when in another era of the Chinese communist regime, there were raids on Christmas Eve midnight masses where Christians were gathering to celebrate the birth of Jesus and were arrested and put in prison, the priest and all of the people, because of their faith, just as all the people standing here have been persecuted because of their faith. So my boss at the time said, we need to stand with them in a special way. Let's make buttons that say Merry Christmas in Chinese characters. There's too many wusses in America right now who are afraid to use the word Christmas and go around saying Happy Holidays, season's greetings. So we said, this way we can wear this button, and when somebody asks what it says, we can not only use the word Christmas, but we can tell them what's happening in China. So we resurrected them this year. When I woke up one morning to hear about Apple and Coca-Cola and all the other companies that have sold out and are lobbying against legislation to help the Uyghur people of East Turkestan and others, I said, you know what? We have these American-made buttons with Chinese characters. These were not made by slave labor. And I want to let people know as well, if you have a Christmas tree at home and you put lights on your Christmas tree, in many cases those lights were made by prisoners in concentration camps and labor camps in China. So remember that when you light your Christmas tree, and say a prayer for those who are being imprisoned there. Finally, I want to thank Congressman Scott Perry and all of those who are standing with the vulnerable and persecuted people of China. As far as I remember, Scott Perry's bill talks not just transnational, but transcontinental, because this is a transcontinental evil that is going on. So we want to support the transcontinental criminal organization designation for the Chinese Communist Party. Nobody has ever deserved it more. It makes me think, though, if there had been a brave congressman like Scott Perry during the time of the Nazis who had decided to designate the Nazis as a transcontinental criminal organization, we probably would not have had the Holocaust that we had then. So let's stand together. Let's support those members. Let's support the actions of President Trump and Secretary Pompeo. Do you know that there was a pension fund of Americans, military people, both retired and active, who were the money for their retirement was going to be switched over by the Thrift Savings Plan to Chinese companies that build weapons, companies that do security on people in labor camps. And President Trump stopped that, thanks to people speaking out about that. So we want to say thank you for those who speak out in truth. I have read the 9 commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party that was put out by Falun Gong and others, and have seen the millions and millions of people who have renounced the Communist Party in China. So let's stand with them. And thank you very much. And we keep fighting until we get victory. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Ed Martin, President of Phyllis Scalfie Eagles.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you. I'm going to hold this. Just after World War II, in the middle of America, a housewife named Phyllis Schlafly began studying what the Soviet communists said they were going to do to America. And over the next 4 decades, Phyllis Schlafly wrote about what the communists in Russia, the Soviets, intended to do to America. And when so many Americans said, we can just deal with them, it's a big market, Russia, there's a lot of possibilities there, people like Phyllis Schlafly said, you can't make a deal with communists. You can't make a deal with the devil. And so when the Iron Curtain fell and the Soviets, as so famously was put by Ronald Reagan, and I'll repeat it later today, Ronald Reagan said this only turns out one way. We win, you lose. And when the Iron Curtain fell, Phyllis Schlafly began to write about China and the communist regime in China. And she began to write about what the communist regime in China would do to its people and do to the world. And she passed away 4 years ago, just months after endorsing Donald Trump for president, in large part because she had seen politicians of both parties in America say they were against the communist regime in China and do nothing in office. Phyllis Schlafly and all of us watched as politicians promised they would stand up to the communist regime in China, and when they got power, they didn't. And today we stand here today in front of a Capitol building where most of the men and women only got backbone to stand up to the communist regime in China because of Donald J. Trump. And the fact is, as we watch, I know there's that's good. That's what's worth clapping for. As I watch, I'm watching people there in Japan watching us here on TV, and of course in China, their satellites will send it in, and in Taiwan and in the world. And what we say today, as we see in Japan and China and Taiwan, all over the world, you're not alone, because we know the threat of the communist regime in China, not to just its people, and we honor that here, but also to the world. And In America, we've watched in the last decade as the Chinese regime has come to corrupt America. They send their fentanyl in to kill our families. They send their money in to corrupt our universities. They send their influence in to corrupt our bureaucrats. They send our spies in to date our congressmen. And the fact is, their corruption that they bring to America didn't stop the day before Election Day. No one thinks it did. The communist regime in China and its influence on, say it, Google and Facebook and any of the big tech companies and any of the multinationals that want to do business in this country and in that country, they bow towards Beijing. And when you bow towards Beijing, you're not bowing to the Almighty. That's one problem. But you also are turning your gaze from we the people in America. And so, as the Uyghurs have been killed, they're not being mistreated, they're being killed. They're not having an argument about even religion. They're being slaughtered. As the Falun Gong are being persecuted, not with an argument over pamphlets, but with organ harvesting and ostracizing and ending their lives. It's not a debate for the floor of the Congress. It's a war for the future of the world. It's a war for the future of the world. And our organization, the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, across the country, we have activists who are joined with all of you. We're joined with the people up here in saying the Chinese communist regime must be stopped and pledging there's only one way this ends. The last evil empire that decided to take on the United States of America, when Ronald Reagan stood, he said, this ends one way, we win and you lose. And what we need in America is the revolution that started with Donald J. Trump to spread into every state house and every congressional office as they stand up for what's right. Because, again, what's at stake is not an argument about philosophy. It's not an argument about what you think this policy or that should be. It's about existence. It's about the existence of people. It's about life and death. It's that severe. It's that significant. And it's this moment. So in America right now, we're fighting to stop the steal because we saw what happened on Election Day. We know what's happened. And we've watched the media join with the establishment, join with Wall Street, and say, move on, everybody. Even the New York Times wrote a piece a few days ago saying throughout the world, the people that care about freedom prefer Donald Trump. Why? Because they know Joe Biden will roll over for China. And so in the next, 40 days, 35 days, the Lord is going to bless America again like he did in 1776. When everybody said, oh, you lost every battle, General Washington. And he said, well, it's not about winning every battle, it's winning the right battle. And it's not about quitting when you get a step back, but getting back and stepping forward. And so as we stand here today, I say it again to the people of China, and the people in Japan and Taiwan and in that part of the world especially, but all across the world, and to my fellow Americans, we must today recommit ourselves to the truth that the communist regime in China must lose because we and Almighty God must win. So thank you for what you're doing. We stand with you, brothers and sisters. God bless you. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Frank Giffney, President of the Center Security and Vice President of Committee on the Present Danger China. Thank you.
Well, good day. And it is a good day because freedom is what we are here to defend and to fight for, and most especially to protect against the greatest danger to that important human right, that unalienable human right in the history of the world. And that is, of course, the Chinese Communist Party. These men and women and hundreds of millions of others like them have been enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party, or are in the process of being enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party as part of its global colonial empire build-out that the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, calls the Belt and Road Initiative. And what I'm particularly excited about is that our friends from the Uyghur community in East Turkestan and our friends in Tibet and our friends in southern Mongolia have come together under a coalition we call the Captive Nations Coalition, together with a growing number of men and women representing the countries that the Chinese have targeted to compel them to submit through things like debt trap, or I call it payday loan schemes, that wind up expropriating the natural resources or the strategic position and assets of the countries they're targeting for the Belt and Road scam. And it is the coalition that has begun making the case that we're here to talk about today. And I'm very grateful to all of those of you who are here, as well as those of you who are covering this event. Because I think the single most important thing we can do right now to try to stop the Chinese Communist Party and its takeover of the world, to prevent it from continuing to gain access to the immense resources of this country's capital markets, from which they've managed to wrest, by some estimates, $3 trillion. You can buy a lot of enslavement of the world for $3 trillion. And that's exactly what they're doing. So our goal is to come up with a strategy and an initiative that right now could begin undermining what the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, aspires to do. Aspires to do to the people that are represented here, aspires to do to the populations in countries whose sovereignty they are stealing. In fact, I learned the other day that the fine print of the Belt and Road Agreement the Chinese Communist Party forged with the government of Nigeria actually says that if Nigeria can't make the payments on the loans that have been made by the CCP, it will relinquish its sovereignty to China. Imagine. But that's what's at stake here for every single one of these countries. Whether it says it in the fine print or not, that is the objective. So what can we do about it? What could we start doing right now that could make a huge difference for those countries, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, for the free world, which is also in the crosshairs, most especially this country. And I would suggest to you that the single most important and most achievable thing we could do to stop the Chinese Communist Party, to delegitimate the Chinese Communist Party, and to make it exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, for people like the old friends of China on Wall Street, as it was put recently by a Chinese professor, the enablers of so much of what I've just described and what you've been hearing about here. The single most important thing we could do, I believe, is to designate the Chinese Communist Party as what it is, a transnational criminal organization. Because if you think about it, as Ed Martin has said, and I'm sure others, that's exactly what they are, of course. What they do everywhere around the world to their own people, to their enslaved people, to the aspiring enslaved people, and to everybody else is criminal. Crimes against humanity. And naturally, other kinds of murderous, horrific, repressive, totalitarian, communist crimes that have distinguished this country, this republic, I should say, this party, as the global threat that it is. So if, with the stroke of a pen, ladies and gentlemen, the government of the United States does what the Director of National Intelligence said last Sunday on the great Maria Bartiromo's Fox News program, we need to call the Chinese Communist Party what it is, not what they would have us believe it is. And what it is a transnational criminal organization. And with your help, with the help of folks like these, with the help of people across this country who have become aware of the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party, notably the CCP virus that has killed over 250,000 Americans just this year. But that's not the end of it. But that's a reminder of what we were up against and a foretaste of what they have in mind for us if we do not stop them. And all I can say is, God forbid that we empower to run this country going forward people who think the rise of China is to be aspired for and to be accomplished with our help. And there's some people in this town who actually think they're going to be able to do that. So if we have the Trump administration designate the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization now, I don't believe that Joe Biden, if he becomes president of the United States, or all of his subordinates who are either in bed with China, quite literally, or are anxious to help them rise so that we too can submit to their dictates. I believe that designation will be impossible for Joe Biden and company to undo. Because, and I'll close with this, imagine this. The President of the United States, the Attorney General of the United States, the Secretary of State, somebody in this administration says it is a transnational criminal organization. And let's just hallucinate here. A President Biden comes to office and decides one of the things that he's going to do with all of his baggage, with Hunter Biden's corruption, with what appears to be his own corruption at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party, and with all of the folks who are actually working for or with the Chinese Communist Party. Joe Biden decides he's going to say, no, just kidding. They're not actually a transnational criminal organization, when all of the evidence makes it clear they are. I don't think so. But we need your help. We need the help of everyone who's listening to this program. We need the help of all of those who love freedom and want to defend it to ensure that a transnational criminal organization does not get away with destroying this country and every other country that aspires to freedom or that actually is losing it as we speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Ali Alexander, organizer for Stop the Steal.
Stop steal.
We got 100
100 or 200 people here, but we have hundreds of thousands that are watching online. And I just want everybody to know, why is Stop the Steal here? We are trying to save this election for President Trump, but we are also trying to make sure that our ballots count, that they tell us how they count. But people say, why did you start Stop the Steal? It's because of our Declaration of Independence. See, the Founding Fathers did not oppose monarchy, they opposed tyranny. The king's men were abusing their sovereign rights, their Christian liberty. So why is Stop the Steal here for the Uyghur, for East Turkestan? Because we need to stop the steal of their liberty. The CCP is a criminal organization. They worship money. They don't believe in human sovereignty. They are stealing organs. They are stealing rights. They are raping Africa. And they know the game. They have this funny money that we've endorsed. They loan it out to the Africans. They loan it out to the South Americans. They loan it out to Hunter Biden and Wall Street. But what is China taking? China is taking those raw earth minerals from South America and Africa. China is using this funny money for political power in America. They are using it in the intelligence services of Europe. They know that there will be a crash and that we will call them on their money, but they will have all the resources. So Stop the Steal is here at a very pressing time where we are stretched thin because China is the #1 threat. They want the next century, they want the next millennia to belong to China. In China's world, there will be no rights. There will be no fair elections. There will be no transparent counting. China was active in this election. My friend Sidney Powell is going to prove it. They're active in other elections, Mongolia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and it needs to stop. So we have to stop the steal of our organs, the organs of the Uyghurs, stop the steal of the rights. We have to start speaking truth again. One thing that's bothered me about my side, the Republican side, the capitalist side, the conservative side, is that we stop talking about these biblical truths, these philosophical truths. Our rights come from heaven. They wrote that so that no government could write it out.
Right.
So we need to tell the Chinese people that we stand with them. We need to tell the people of Tibet and Taiwan that we stand with them. We need to say that we were all created by the same God. We are all children of God. And stop the steal, which, by the way, has gone international. We have a Japanese audience and we have a people in Paris protesting. That we stand in solidarity with you for your rights that come from God. And if your government mismanages those rights or prevents elections from you choosing your government, you must rebel. You are compelled to rebel. Thomas Jefferson wrote that you are obligated to rebel. We will stop the steal, and Republicans in this administration and Republicans in the Mitch McConnell majority have an obligation over these next 6 to 8 weeks to designate the CCP as a criminal organization to protect these people who are being raped and raided. And lastly, like Frank said, let's make it hard. Let's make it real hard. If heaven forbid, Joe Biden seizes power with the deep state, seizes power with this fake news media, seizes power with funny money Wall Street. If he does seize power, let's make it really difficult. Let's contrast his values with God's values. He stands with the anti-human China. We believe that all children are children of God. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Norwegian Uyghur youth activist.
Good afternoon. It is with great pleasure pleasure to be here on International Human Rights Day representing my fellow Uyghurs and those who advocate on behalf of them. On this day in 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and in honor of this day, I would like to share with you both the struggles and successes of the Uyghurs in their fight against the injustice that they have faced. I would like to present several themes, beginning with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which was passed by the House in September of this year. Although the passing of this bill marks a great moment in history for the Uyghurs and the human rights organization at large, we still have a ways to go. The abuses against the Uyghurs have been brought to the attention of many U.S. senators who have recently introduced a resolution to designate and acknowledge China's abuse of their rights against the Uyghurs as genocide. We as a nation must emphasize the corruption imposed by China and the Chinese Communist Party by acknowledging it as a part of the top international criminal organization's target list. Among the top reasons Chinese Communist Party qualifies to be on the top international criminal organization list is their immoral theft of American intellectual property and international trafficking of fentanyl. Before I conclude this speech, the final point that weighs heavily on the future of the Uyghurs is the passing of the act that recognizes East Turkestan as an independent country occupied by China. The Uyghurs have faced a long-term violence against their civil rights, which have left them susceptible to further abuse. As a fellow American, it is my only wish and intent to express the dire need of America to raise awareness and promote representation for the Uyghurs. We cannot progress without a strong, united belief of equal rights for all. If we fail to address this, I'm afraid they will not only impose their tyrannical motivations on the Uyghur people, but project that will worldwide. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Thomas Olmaz, Uyghur activist, former Vice President of the Uyghur American Association.
Hello everyone, I should say it's good afternoon. Before I start my speech, I want to tell my feeling about every day. I wake up every day and I check my WeChat. Is there any news from my parents, from my brothers, relatives, and other friends? Yes, if there isn't a news, it's a good news. And every time my daughter's teachers say about my daughter, she's special, but I don't like special, this word. I would like to say, I won't let my children be a common person, be a happy person, not a special person, not the special people. And I can't do this alone, but we can do this together. So from small action, I urge today, you guys, standing here, please check your clothes. Which country made your clothes? If it's made by China, it's high probably made by concentration camps. It's most probably my sisters and brothers made this clothes, which is you're wearing right now. This is the small action we can do together. And another actions are, please search East Turkestan from Google and Uyghur, and search from congress.com, Uyghur and East Turkestan. You can find some kind of bill, and you can write a letter to your Congress and the Senate and support those bills. And I can speak my speech right now. Today marks International Human Rights Day, which was chosen to honor the United Nations adoption and the proclamation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. A year later, East Turkestan was invaded and occupied by China, leading to the eradication of all people's basic human rights and freedoms. For 71 years, East Turkestan and its people have suffered colonization, occupation, and genocide. In recent years, the Chinese Communist Party's brutality hit a new level to where our entire population, regardless of whether we live in Turkestan or the diaspora, have become affected. All of the Turkestanis here today have relatives, some of which are their mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers who have been sent to concentration camps. Millions of Uyghurs and other Turkic people, including Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Uzbeks, and Tatars, are currently locked up in the concentration camps, sent to prisons, labor camps, and used as slave labor. In the case of East Turkestani women, the atrocities that they have faced go beyond torture, as they are subjected to forced marriages, sexual humiliation, rape, forced abortion, and sterilization. This has caused our entire nation, especially the women, both physically and psychologically damaged that is irreparable. Over 500,000 Uyghur and other Turkic children have been torn apart from their mothers, their family, and sent to state-run orphanages and broad schools to be brainwashed into worship the CCP and the China state as their mothers and family. Their identity as Uyghur, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uzbek, and Tatar has been removed from them and replaced by an identity labeling them as loyal Chinese communist citizens. Besides, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples, including tens of thousands of women, are being used as slave labor. The people of East Turkestan don't have much time. Every day, countless lives are lost. Women and children especially are suffering. Our people are on the brink of being wiped out. I especially call on women's rights organizations and children's rights organizations to break their silence and speak out against China and its CCP atrocities against women and children in occupied East Turkestan. As a woman, as a mother, a wife, and as an Uyghur American, I call on the U.S. Senate to pass Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and urge the President to sign into law as soon as possible. I urge the U.S. Congress to recognize China and its CCP's Uyghur genocide and pass the genocide resolution quickly. I urge the U.S. Congress to pass Congressman Scott's bill that would designate the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. Lastly, I urge the U.S. Congress to treat East Turkestan on par with Tibet by recognizing East Turkestan as an independent country that is occupied by China. We can have no human rights or freedom while the murderous CCP criminals can get away with attacks on the whole of humanity. We call on the U.S. Congress and the U.S. government and the entire world to take stronger actions to hold China and its CCP accountable. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Sehun Kim, Captive Nation Coalition. Up.
Hello, everyone. Today is a very special day, December 10th, where we remember human rights and celebrate human rights and do everything that we can to preserve human rights in our country. Before I start, I just want to start off with something that just happened a second ago. A heckler just came by and stared at our signs and said, leave China to do what it is, right? Basically saying, China's doing a great job. Sounds hilarious, but it's also a serious issue. In our country, there are individuals like that, unfortunately in higher up places, that are causing this, what you see in this picture right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is only a beginning. I'm not here to support any candidate or any party. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here as an American. I'm here as a human being, and I'm here as a brother to all of the people of East Turkestan, the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Tajiks, as well as all the Tibetans, Southern Mongolians, and the Chinese people. This issue is greater than all of us. And it is greater than all of us because this is the task that I truly believe that the Lord gave us. To not only solve, but to also reflect upon our past actions. I hold this sign today proudly to let the world know that this is just, unfortunately, the beginning. And it is only the beginning because whatever is happening in China under the grasp of the Chinese Communist Party will most likely spread to our shores, quite literally. This is the battle that we have to fight, not only diplomatically and politically, but in our homes as well. You know, this whole narrative that, oh, everything's made in China, it's so difficult to just, simply boycott them. Well, remember, as an immigrant, I can also tell you that this nation is known for making a difference that was impossible. We did put a man on the moon when it was impossible. We did win the Civil War when people have said that institutionally slavery was impossible to get rid of. So no, do not tell me that bullcrap. Because here in this country, anything is possible. And I call upon all Republicans, Democrats, Independent, or anybody who's not politically affiliated to be united as Americans. What we saw today, as that heckler said, is embarrassing. But unfortunately, it's the reality that we face today in the mindset of so many countless Americans and the people around the world. And I say this today, let's wake up. Let's all hold our hands together as Americans. Doesn't matter if you're Republicans, Democrats, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, it does not matter. We are all one together under this flag that we call the proud flag of the United States of America. And I would like to also mention this. We all look different, but at heart, the same blood flows within all of our bodies. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for that. What do I mean by accountable? As human beings, we are obligated to act on human rights. We are obligated to do what the Lord has given in our lives to do, which is to do the right thing at all cost. You know, none of these folks should actually be up in this stand today with their flags and with their message of stop the genocide. It should have been done a long time ago. And our ancestors are rolling over their graves as they are looking at us right now, as that, why are you making the same mistakes as we are? Where so many Jews have been killed, exterminated in concentration camps, where so many soldiers had to give up their lives to protect, to fight against the evil that existed once before. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let us not continue that mistake. Let us stand as proud Americans, and let us also stand as free people of the world under the banner of justice and true freedom. Stop the genocide and stop the constant forgetfulness of what we all stand for, which is freedom. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the rest of the world, and let us all do the right thing. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, I would like to give a speech. I want to thank everyone for being here today and standing with us in the solidarity with the victims of China and its Communist Party. My name is Arif Jan. I am an Uyghur from East Turkestan who has been living in exile since 4 years old. Today is International Human Rights Day. For the past 71 years since China occupied East Turkestan, our people have been deprived of all human rights and freedom. We are facing nothing less than a genocide. The genocide and loss of human rights and freedom stem from China and its Communist Party invading East Turkestan. Over the past 71 years, millions of our people were killed by China and the CCP through various means, including nuclear testing, organ harvesting, forced abortion, execution, and torture. Today, we face a 21st century Holocaust like genocide where millions of our people are locked up in concentration camps and prisons. The CCP is eradicating our culture, religion, identity, and our very own existence. Today, hundreds and thousands of Uyghurs and other Turkic people are being used as slaves by CCP. That is why U.S. Senate must pass the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act with urgency. We urge Americans and all people of world to boycott Made in China. We urge U.S. Congress, the U.S. government, and all the entities worldwide to acknowledge the East Turkestan is an independent country occupied by China. We call the world to recognize the Uyghurs as who they are, a unique separate nation, not by what the China CCP claims who we are. We all deserve a state where we can live and breathe as a free men and women, where we can celebrate our culture, speak our mother tongue, and worship freely. China and CCP falsely claim East Turkestan as part of China, yet they refer East Turkestan as Xinjiang, which translates as new territory. In reality, East Turkestan is an independent state that has been illegally occupied since 1949.
Is an independent state that has been illegally occupied since 1949. The CCP has spread corruption to all parts of the world, including here in the United States. The CCP coronavirus has caused the loss of over 1.5 million lives across the globe, including over 286,000 here in the United States. It has decimated the global economy and deprived us from many of the freedom we enjoy here in the U.S. The CCP has used spies and agents to coerce, infiltrate, and corrupt organizations, individuals, and communities worldwide, including here in the United States. The world has to recognize China under the CCP is not a state, nor is it a nation, neither a country. It is an evil empire ruled by criminal communist dictatorship that invades, occupies, subjugates other countries and its people. Unfortunately, due to world leader appeasement policies towards CCP, the evil empire is expanding. The CCP rose to the power in China on October 1st, 1949. China then invaded its neighbor countries of East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Tibet, creating the evil empire known as the People's Republic of China. East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Tibet, and Hong Kong are suffering under the evil PRC empire occupation. Taiwan, India, and the whole of the Indo-Pacific are under constant threat of invasion. If the world fails to act, it won't be long before evil empire expand its physical borders by invading other souvenir nation, which will lead to the downfall of democracy and human rights as across the world. The people of East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Tibet, and Hong Kong and Taiwan do not wish to be part of this empire. Nor do the people of China want to be governed by the CCP. It is time that the world has said enough is enough and take the strong, concrete action to bring down the CCP and dissolve this empire. At the end, I would like to say, never again, question mark, question mark, question mark. Thank you. Now we will chant for 10 minutes. After that, we're going to wrap up.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Thank you to all of our great American friends and supporters for coming out here from all across the country, really, to stand in solidarity with the people of East Turkestan and others who are victims of China and its Communist Party. We hope that our message is clear, has gotten clearly to the United States Congress and to the United States government. If the U.S. Congress fails to recognize the CCP as a transnational criminal organization within the next several weeks, we hope and we urge President Trump to sign an executive order recognizing the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. Similarly, there is no doubt what China is doing in East Turkestan is a genocide. So if the Senate and the House fail to get this genocide resolution passed as soon as possible, then it is up to the U.S. government, and especially President Trump, to show moral leadership by signing an executive order to recognize China's atrocities against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in occupied East Turkestan as a genocide. Now we'd like to, before we wrap up, we're going to chant for about 10 minutes. It's already 1 o'clock, and so I don't want to keep everyone here longer than they should be, longer than they were. So if you could just bear with us. Gonna face that way. Or, yeah, we're just gonna face that way. Recognize the CCP as a transnational criminal organization! The CCP is a criminal organization! The CCP is a criminal organization! Stand up, America! Stand up, America! Stand up, America! Stand up, America! Stand up against criminal China!
Stand up against criminal China!
Stand up against the CCP criminals!
Stand up against the CCP criminal!
Stand up, America!
Stand up, America!
Stand up, America!
Stand up, America!
China!
Fascist China!
Fascist CCP!
Fascist CCP!
Criminal China!
Criminal China!
Criminal CCP!
Criminal CCP!
Down, down!
Nazi China!
Nazi China!
Nazi China!
Nazi China!
Welcome back, everyone. We're here standing in front of the U.S. Capitol, and we are here supporting one of the rallies calling on the designation of the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. The organizers here are with the Stop the Steal rally. They're here supporting some of the different groups. We have Muslim Uyghurs, we have Chinese Christians, we have Catholic groups here, all coming together to call for an end of persecution in China, to call for religious freedom in China, and to call again for the Chinese Communist Party, the communist system in power in China, to be designated a transnational criminal organization for its abuses of human rights, for its suppression of religious freedom, and for its suppression of free speech. So we have a few different groups out here. Again, the Stop the Steal rally, Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. We're going to get a few different people to speak with us now, working on that now. We have Frank Gaffney coming on in just a second. He's with the coalition. He's with the coalition of the Present Danger China. So let's see if we can get him on right now. Frank Gaffney, it's a real pleasure. Yeah, thanks again. Good to see you. Thank you. Really appreciate what you guys do. You too, as well, yeah.
Put it on, okay.
Up here. I can't see what I'm doing.
It's okay, we got you.
No.
I trust you're getting paid union wages to do this.
All right, tell us when we're good. Yeah, so Frank Gaffney, it's a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
So, of course, you're with the coalition of the Present Danger China, and you've recognized now China, the Chinese Communist Party specifically, as a threat to the United States. What was it that made you all make this coalition to recognize the CCP as a threat to the U.S.?
Well, the perception and the reality that the Chinese Communist Party seeks the destruction of the United States was kind of the impetus behind pulling together what is really the third iteration of this, the fourth iteration, I guess, actually, of this committee. There were two during the Cold War. There was a third shortly after the attacks of 9/11. And then this one was started up in the spring of 2019. It seems like it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long year.
18 months. It's been a very long year. Exactly right. Anyway, so we came together, as did the one that was probably most impactful, which was in 1976, and wound up helping Ronald Reagan conceive of and socialize with the American people the idea that his time's existential threat to freedom had to be resisted, not appeased, which was the plan of détente, as you may remember. And so we're very much inspired by that, and we believe that pulling together a similar kind of team of subject matter experts and national security practitioners and human rights leaders, religious freedom activists, and the like would enable us to hopefully help this time's leaders, whoever they may be, address properly this time's existential threat to freedom, which of course is the Chinese Communist Party.
So we're in an interesting situation right now. We have the Stop the Steal rally working together with the Muslim Uyghur community, calling for human rights in China. There's Christian groups here. There's Falun Gong practitioners here. There's an interesting bringing together of all these different camps opposing the Chinese Communist Party and standing by what the United States stands for. I guess, of course, you're here as well. I mean, what's your perception of this, I'd say, battle with the United States and the Chinese Communist Party and a lot of these different groups coming together in ways we've never really seen before, I think, to stand up for freedom and to oppose the Chinese Communist Party. What's your perception of this?
Well, let me just say, I think the Epoch Times has had a significant role in helping lots of people who might not otherwise have perceived the threat from the CCP do so and realize that common cause needs to be made given the magnitude of the danger it poses to all of us. But I think that what we've been witnessing is, especially with the COVID-19 or CCP virus, I prefer to call it, attack on our country, deliberately undertaken by the Chinese Communist Party, if not actually engineered for the purpose, certainly exploited once it emerged. That, I think it was Samuel Johnson said, had the effect of concentrating the mind wondrously, because the prospect of hanging does that to you. And I think that what we're witnessing, thanks in no small measure, of course, to President Trump's leadership, and that of almost all of his administration, Secretary Steve Mnuchin of the Treasury Department is a notable exception to that. But just about everybody else has been very clear about the fact that we're now dangerously exposed, both externally and internally, not just to Chinese influence operations, but to the CCP's more mortal threats, the unrestricted warfare that it has talked about now for decades as their strategy for taking us down.
Well, you know what's interesting? I know you and I have, of course, been writing about this stuff for quite a while now. I never actually thought it would become a mainstream topic. It was always a few defense experts and, international security experts talking about this threat kind of on the fringes. I never thought it'd be center stage in front of the U.S. Capitol. But now it's one of the main discussions, even with the election. Was China involved with these machines that influenced the election? Was China involved with influence operations that impacted the stances politically of different U.S. leaders? What's your perception, I think, of the way the Chinese Communist Party uses these networks to manipulate politics? Now that it's becoming one of the main discussions in the U.S.
Well, you said a lot of things that are interesting I'd like to talk about. But on that last question, I think that what we have witnessed unmistakably is the use of political warfare as one of the vectors of attack for the Chinese Communist Party in its unrestricted warfare campaign. And as you know, that kind of political warfare includes everything from influence operations, from corruption of political leaders, from subversion, from running United Front organizations to do things like registering voters. And I think probably in the process recruiting them for the Chinese Communist Party as well. And, of course, not least using civil strife, including violent insurrectionary activity, as an instrument for taking down our country and our government. And the thing that's just maddening most to me and to our Committee on the Present Danger of China has been the extent to which we have been enabling so much of that by the transfer of wealth to the CCP, mostly from unwitting American investors and the indexes or pension funds or whatever else might be the instrument for doing it. Trillions of dollars have made it possible for the Chinese Communist Party to be the threat that it is today. So all of this is, I think, now beginning to become more evident to more people. And one of the things we really set our sights on as the committee got started in March of 2019 was the idea of making sure the public actually understood these various dimensions of the threat and that we had to respond appropriately. And very much the way that the Committee on the Present Danger did during the run-up to the Reagan administration in terms of thinking about a strategy that could win, so thinking about how the public could be pulled in behind it. And I'm gratified that that's borne some fruit, again, for lots of different reasons, but we're in a desperately late hour for winning if we're going to. And I think the thing that's exciting about the kinds of coalitions that are now coming together. And, you know, the enactment, or at least the passage in both houses of Congress recently by unanimous votes. I can't remember the last time something consequential had that kind of support. The truth of the matter is that it has a sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card, this particular legislation that said we're not going to allow you, the Chinese Communist Party and its front companies, to have access to our capital markets unless you submit to our accounting standards. But the law gives them 3 years to do that.
That's a long time to cause a lot of damage.
It's a very long time.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things that I think is offsetting a little bit my enthusiasm for both the bill and the prospect of real bipartisanship. But what's also concentrating our minds, I think, and it's tragic, you mentioned the American people in the election. I was just being apprised today that 10% of self-described Biden voters didn't know, despite your best efforts and despite, you know, the New York Post's and Tucker Carlson's. Most of those voters had no idea that Joe Biden was as compromised by the Chinese Communist Party as he is. Witness Hunter Biden's computer and so on. And more to the point, had they known, they would not have voted for him.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at that and you realize that the media, social and traditional, essentially through this election, by virtue of refusing to cover that story, or at least cover it accurately, calling it Russian, disinformation, that is another example of the fraud that we've been subjected to. And it's imperative that we spare our country, I think, having somebody who is president and is compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, because there's no mistaking it. They will exploit that. They will not simply take advantage of it, but I think they will be emboldened to believe this is the moment when they can decisively take us out.
Frank Gaffney, it's a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for what you do.
And this guy's been calling out the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party longer than I have. So.
Well, communists longer than you've been alive is the point. But it's an ongoing affair.
Really appreciate
Thank you.
it, sir.
Thanks for what you do again.
Yeah.
Hey, you're welcome. Hi.
Give me 1 minute. We're doing a broadcast.
Sorry, I gotta get that up.
A lot of people here talking about human rights in China, calling out the Chinese Communist Party for its abuses of those rights, calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization, and also calling for the Stop the Steal, standing up against the subversion of our country and what's happening right now with China as it relates again to the election as well. Now, we have a few other guests coming on. Just give us a minute. We have coming up Michael Yan. He is a war correspondent, and he was in Hong Kong during these democracy protests. Michael Yan, it's a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Good to be back with you.
Yeah, so you might remember, Michael, we had him on during the Hong Kong protests, and Michael, it's great seeing you out here.
Thank you. I came back in September straight to Portland because of the issues with Antifa out there, and then up to Washington State, then here, Philadelphia, back here, down to Atlanta, Florida, and back here again, basically just watching the situation unfold.
Yeah, and so you all might remember, last time we spoke with you, I think you were in Singapore because they kicked you out of Hong Kong, right?
Right, they kicked me out of Hong Kong and went to Thailand, where I have an office,
yeah.
Right. And actually I was heading to Taiwan, and then from Thailand, but then the issues kicked up in the United States. And so I came to the United States instead of Taiwan.
Yeah. Now, we're an interesting rally right now. There's a very diverse group of people. There's Muslim Uyghurs, there's Falun Gong practitioners, there's Catholics, there's Christians, who knows what else actually, and all coming together. Really, the closeness of the people here is interesting. It seems everyone gets along great, coming together for one common cause, which is standing up against socialism, whether it's in China or whether it's here in the United States. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, that's what I do. That's why I was in Hong Kong, and that's why they kicked me out of Hong Kong. This is an existential threat for a lot of people, not just the Uyghurs and the Tibetans, not just Hong Kong or Taiwan, but the United States and Japan as well. That's why we have somebody from Okinawa here. I see many people from, like you said, from around the world. And the scourge of communism just doesn't go away. We're going to have to continue to fight it and continue to beat it.
Now, Michael, now you've of course worked on exposing these different, say, insurgency movements. Oftentimes, at least in Hong Kong, you were of course with the Hong Kong protesters opposing the Chinese Communist Party. Now we see in the United States the other side of it. People say there's also an insurgency movement that has been trying to undermine the President of the United States, Donald Trump, at least until recently. And we see now these allegations of the election being stolen. What are your perceptions of this? What is going on in this country right now?
It's clear that there's a vast attempt to steal the election. That's obvious to anybody that's paying attention and who's honest about it. There is clearly more than one insurgency, and some of this has been cooking for many generations, since long before our grandparents were born, and some of it's coming to fruition. Some of it's sponsored by China, and other components are not. But certainly they're coming to a head in the United States. I think 2021 could be a lot more intense than 2020 has been. People need to prepare be prepared for a much more intense 2021.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, it's a real pleasure having this show. Thanks again. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Josh.
Always good seeing you. Thank you. Yeah, so, folks, again, we're here at one of the Stop the Steal rally events. This one is with the different human rights organizations calling for the ends of persecutions in China. And this is specifically calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational organized criminal organization. We have a few other people here with us we're going to be speaking to. Just give us a minute. Everybody, we're again here at one of the rallies in Washington, D.C., and we're here with Ed Martin with the Phyllis Schlafly's Eagles, and he's one of the organizers of the Stop the Steal protest. And so, Ed, it's a real pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thanks. Great to see you again. I appreciate it. Thanks for a chance to talk to your great listeners.
Yeah, so the event we're at specifically right now is calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization. And it's interesting to see that the Stop the Steal rally organizers are also backing this. Why back this as well? I'm curious.
Well, you know, I wear a couple hats when I showed up. And as I said when I spoke, my old mentor, my boss, the late Phyllis Schlafly, she wrote for the last 2.5 decades of her life about the problem of the communist regime. She was writing ahead of a lot of Americans and had a letter. It was called the Cardinal Mindszenty letter. And Cardinal Cardinal Mindszenty was a famous Hungarian Catholic cardinal who stood up against the Soviets, kind of like Cardinal Zen has done in China. So we care about this issue a lot. And so when we talked about this was happening, I had that interest. And then Stop the Steal, you know, what we've seen in the last 4 years, this president has helped clarify how the Chinese regime, the communist regime, has tried to corrupt America. They've tried to corrupt us with fentanyl. They try to corrupt us with getting our Wall Street companies to act against our interests. Our universities, our politicians, you know, these Congressmen Swalwell. I mean, a lot of things that have happened. And I don't know anyone that seriously thinks the Chinese communists decided to stand down on the election. Why would they? They're doing everything they can in every other aspect. And what we've seen, the evidence that's been presented, lots of indications of things that don't make sense, the things that are related to software, related to management of the election system, and we want to get to the bottom of it. So I believe this president helped us, the American people, realize what some of us knew, which is that the Communist Party in China is a criminal entity. It's not an interesting aberration in leadership. It's a criminal entity. Its goal is to destroy other nations, to dominate them, and we have to be clear about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see because, you know, you and I, of course, have known each other for a few years now.
Yep.
Actually, they invited a few of us to speak. I was one of the speakers at one of your conferences.
Eagle Council, yep.
And at that time, the idea that the Chinese Communist Party was waging an unconventional war on the United States was still kind of a fringe topic.
Yep.
And you recognize the seriousness. And here we are now. This is one of the main narratives with what's happening in the country.
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, I give Phyllis Schlafly credit. She was very, very smart about looking down the field and not being afraid to. You know, you look around this town, there's a lot of institutions, conservative and liberal so-called, who have received benefits from dealing with the Chinese communist regime. You don't have to dig deep to see it, and therefore the policies and the way they think about policies have been to stand back. And we have been very blessed. Nobody gets to say what we believe, and we were ahead on that. I think we also saw what the work you were doing and the Epoch Times to give us a focus. So, but look, what's happening here is it's important. The election, Stop the Steal, is important, but as important is the momentum of elected officials and others recognizing. You have to name what's happening, otherwise you can't combat it. And again, when you say that the Communist Party is a criminal enterprise, you're naming what has happened in a way that gives you a way to act on it, right? If you have a criminal enterprise, you have to do something about it. And it's important for the American people to keep making progress with our leaders in holding them accountable on that.
Yeah. And in terms of where the country's at right now, people are talking about, as I've said on my show many times, freedom versus socialism.
Yeah.
And this seems to be the narrative of what is happening in just about every part of the country. Not just the United States, even other countries as well. Europe, Australia, China even itself. People are standing up against tyranny, and tyranny is fighting back.
Right, and also, and you know, one of the things that the communist regime in China teaches us is there were a lot of Americans that would have conversations. They'd say things like, "Look, China's economy is actually sort of open. Some of these businesses are sort of independent," and what we know is that's not true. In America, some of the big tech giants are so co-opted by the system, by the swamp, and by China, the regime, that they are part of the problem, right? So the American people are looking up, and they're not just saying, "Give us freedom." They're saying the institutions have been corrupted. The fake news has been really destructive. The big tech companies really destructive. And we have to take a lesson as we see what domination, because America has more freedom in our nation than, of course, the Chinese because of the communist regime. But we have to be careful to see what could happen. And also we have to challenge ourselves to support people all over the world that are look, the reason I care about the Chinese people succeeding is I do have faith, and I want every single person to have dignity. But as an American, I care most that we stop the communist regime from destroying my nation. I want the Chinese people to have a wonderful nation someday too. Right now, the communist regime is a threat to my children and to our nation, and every nation should feel that way. So it is Americans' eyes are opened, but we have a lot more work to do.
Now, Ed, just last question.
Yeah.
One of the themes here today is religious freedom.
Yeah.
You, of course, have your beliefs.
Yeah.
You were standing together with the Muslim Uyghurs and supporting them just as much.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, you know, from the founding of America, we were always, our founding documents are so interesting to study, but also the founding principles. America was founded as a Judeo-Christian nation. meaning you didn't have to be either one of those faiths, but the thing that held us together was this sort of set of values. And then we allowed freedom for everyone. That was always our position, and that was extraordinarily important. When you look at what's happening with the Chinese regime, whether the adherents of Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, Catholics, who I know well, Cardinal Zen I mentioned, the oppression of communism is anti-freedom for everyone. So you don't get to say, well, I'm a Christian, they're not being so tough on me. No, their principle is that way. And so when we stand together, I think Americans have this great tradition of religious liberty, and we want that for everyone. That's in our DNA. But we also see China. The regime is so, they're not, again, it's not a debate about whether they think the schools should have the ability to teach something. They're taking people out of their families and putting them in camps. They're taking people and oppressing the way they learn their life and their, the stories of the Falun Gong. Is it Jennifer Zen?
Jennifer Zen, yes.
Her book is extraordinary. What they did to her family and to her. That kind of thing is not in a novel. That's in what's in life, and we have to be stronger about that than ever because of the oppression. So it's American to be for religious liberty, but it's also necessary because we're worried about what the communist regime can do all over the world.
Great. Ed Martin, it's a real pleasure having the show.
Great to see you again, yeah.
And again, Ed Martin's one of the organizers as well of the Stop the Steal rally. He's going to be heading that up on Saturday in Washington, D.C.
Big deal on Saturday, yeah. We'll hope to see you there.
Great. Ed, pleasure as always.
Thank you. Thanks, yep. Good seeing you again. Yep. Good. Great. Oh, yeah, take it. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Bye, man. Good to see you.
Thank you. All right, so folks, we're still here at one of the rallies alongside the Stop the Steal rally. This one is co-sponsored by them, and this is again calling for an end, right? Calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational organized criminal organization. And so we're again speaking to some different folks here, calling out what the Chinese Communist Party is, which is a totalitarian system that operates like a mafia and that is persecuting religion, persecuting the freedom of speech of every person in the country, and also doing different methods such as unrestricted warfare to target other countries, including the United States. We have a few other people here we're going to be speaking with. Let's jump into some of the other interviews now. Actually, Saleh Hudayar, one sec. Yeah, you might remember Saleh Hudayar. He's the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile with the Muslim Uyghurs. So we'll get a mic on you in just one sec. Saleh Hudayar, it's a real pleasure having you back on the show. Thank you very much. And so, interesting times we're in. So, Saleh Hudayar is again the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile, the Muslim Uyghurs we hear about. And we've seen a lot of development since we last spoke. We've seen different organizations, different businesses, different Chinese Communist Party officials get sanctioned for their use of slave labor in Xinjiang, also called East Turkestan, which was invaded, of course, by the Chinese Communist Party. And so, Saleh, why don't you tell us about a bit about this event we just held here?
So we just held a large rally here in front of the U.S. Capitol to commemorate International Human Rights Day by urging the U.S. Congress to designate China's Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. I would say that's like the most kind way that we could use to describe what China's Communist Party really is. I would go far as beyond as calling it a terrorist organization. After all, they've killed over 70 million people, more than any other regime throughout history.
Well, in terms of the suppression, political suppression, in terms of the use of violence for political goals, in terms of the way it pushes down people with free speech, in terms of what it does with human rights abuses, I think you're right on that.
Yes. And right now they're engaging in a Holocaust-like genocide in East Turkestan. Millions of people are locked up in concentration camps. Yesterday, Ethan Goodman, he revealed some more up-to-date information about organ harvesting and discovered that in some concentration camps in East Turkestan, there are crematoriums, high-tech crematoriums, smokeless high-tech crematoriums, and these concentration camps are within a few kilometers of airports where there are special lanes for organs only. So you can say from this we have evidence that China is killing people in the concentration camps, harvesting their organs, and then cremating them to hide the evidence. There have also been, RFA has reported, and they've interviewed Chinese police working in these concentration camps. One of these gentlemen, he said, within a 6-month period, over 150 people had died in one small concentration camp alone.
Yeah. So those of you who are watching this, the Epoch Times actually first broke this story back 2006, I believe it was, that the Chinese Communist Party was using political prisoners, people persecuted for their faith, for their beliefs, or for speaking out against the regime itself, using them as living sources for organ transplants. Among the main victims of this, Muslim Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, even house Christians and others. And as you mentioned now, they have a fast-track system for this, even having lanes at the airport where people can be more quickly brought into the system to be killed for their organs. I mean, horrifying stuff.
I mean, it is a 21st century Holocaust-like genocide. The U.S. Senate back in October introduced a resolution to recognize the atrocities as a genocide. We're again urged the U.S. Congress to recognize, to pass this resolution as soon as possible. And if that doesn't happen, we've been urging the State Department and the White House to recognize the atrocities as a genocide and take stronger actions to hold China accountable. In fact, we put forth a complaint to the International Criminal Court against 31 Chinese officials for genocide and other crimes against humanity in East Turkestan.
Now, Sally, we're in an interesting situation in this country right now. As you were holding this event, calling for an end of genocide in China, we had a heckler come by and throw insults at you folks, and saying, of course, let China do what they want, essentially, and was angry because, of course, you have stop the steal signs about the presidential elections right now. It's a bizarre situation because on one side you have people who say that they support Muslims, they oppose genocide, they oppose things like the Nazi regime that carried out very similar things. But with you folks, when you're calling for religious freedom, calling for an end to genocide, somehow they don't put two and two together on this. If you were to give one message to the American people on this and what you stand for, what would you say?
I mean, we're essentially striving for our existence. That's about it. We have no alternative motives. We're not trying to, we don't hate China, we're not here trying to take a part of China or anything. We just want what's ours. China, under the Communist Party, invaded our country, took us over, and this is something that could happen to other countries. The Belt and Road Initiative. China made the Chinese Communist Party in 1949. They made the same promises that they are selling to countries across the world through the Belt and Road Initiative. We're going to help you develop your country. We're going to help you, modernize all this. We're going to give you loans, etc. But in the end, what they're doing is they're setting themselves up for neo-colonization. These countries, the Chinese Communist Party, they flood it with Chinese workers. So the available, workforce, they don't have jobs. Then they bring in, their wives, their children, their families, and then you have neo-colonies, small colonies set up. And over the course of several decades, you have the demographics are altered out on a large scale. East Turkestan, for example, in 1949, over 90% Uyghur and other Turkic peoples, less than 5% Chinese. Today, we're about 45 to 50% Uyghur and other Turkic peoples to about 40% Chinese. This is what, Belt and Road brought us, the precursor of Belt and Road, you could say, and China is trying to export this to other countries. People, regardless of what country, what ideology that they have, they need to understand that the CCP is a threat to their own existence, to their own sovereignty, and they need to protect it at all costs.
Saleh Houdiar, real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much. Thank you. Folks, again, we're here in front of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., at a rally calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization. And also the folks organizing it are with the Stop the Steal rally. We have a few other folks here with us. We have here Jason Johnson,
Jason Jones.
Jason Jones.
Good to see you. It's close.
Close.
Hey, you're warm. I like that.
Got my hands in my pockets. Yeah, and so, Jason, of course, you're a Hollywood producer. You're with a few other organizations talking about human rights as well. Now, it's interesting to see you out here because this is both an event for human rights and an event talking about Stop the Steal. What do you think brings these two issues together?
Oh, the CCP. I think the CCP brings these two issues together. You know, I make films to promote human dignity, to inspire solidarity with the vulnerable. By God's grace, they've been very successful, so people think of me as a filmmaker, but I think of myself as a human rights activist who uses film. And it is a privilege to be here because when you think of the Uyghur, they're the most vulnerable people in the world right now. And when you stand with the vulnerable, there's a cost. If you're in the entertainment industry and you want to stand up to the CCP, your manager, your agent, your producing partners, your investors, they're going to lean on you to shut up. But I'm here because if we can't stand with the truly vulnerable, then why even use words like justice ever? Really, you know?
Well, and that's an important point because we often see people in Hollywood talking about save the dolphins and save the seals or whatever. But when it comes to calling out genocide, actual genocide, calling out the crimes against humanity where people are being used as living sources for organ transplants, there's a hesitation on calling this out. Why is this?
Well, I think, first of all, the crimes of the CCP are so horrific that they seem unbelievable. They are unthinkable. They're unimaginable. So I think it's easy for people to just try to dismiss. And then when you can no longer evade the truth of what the CCP is doing, then you realize it's dangerous to stand up to the CCP. As we have heard with the braggadocious professor this week, they have friends everywhere. So it takes courage. The world is dividing into really two groups. Those who are willing to stand with the vulnerable and those who are willing to profit from the exploitation of the vulnerable. It's no longer clear-cut where it's the United States in one corner and the Soviet Union in the other corner. Now, in one corner is the CCP, is Apple, is Walmart, is Coca-Cola. And in the other corner are just those folks like the Epoch Times, the Uyghur who are here today, the Falun Gong. These are the folks who have been ambushed by violence. So they have a deep empathy that they have experienced through their own personal suffering. When you experience the suffering, then it really awakens in you a sense of solidarity with other people who suffer. I lost a child to violence, my first child, when I was a young man. That is what woke me up. So when I think of China's first victim, the CCP's first victim were the Chinese. You think of the one-child policy. Every family in China is addled by the sorrow caused by the CCP, the inescapable grief of the one-child policy, they still have coerced abortions, by the way, the inescapable grief of not being able to protect your daughter or your wife from the state-sponsored violence in the womb. You think of the Biren massacre from 1990, the only massacre that happened in the womb, hundreds and hundreds of forced abortions when China pushed in, the CCP pushed in to East Turkestan and rounded up all of those pregnant women. A massacre in the womb. So what started in China is spreading now around the world.
Now, Jason, you're in an interesting position as well. You're in Hollywood. You could make a lot of money producing films and these types of things, but you're doing this also for a human rights purpose. And you're standing by people whose beliefs are different than yours. Why is this?
Well, it's... First of all, I love anyone whose feet are grounded in the numinous, that are thinking about their creator, that are just groping to know and love and understand the source of our existence. As a Christian, as a Catholic, my faith teaches me that God became a man, and that really revealed the profound dignity of every human being. And so I know that when I look at you, I'm looking in the most beautiful created thing in the cosmos. I can get an Elon Musk spaceship and go for all eternity in any direction. There's going to be nothing more valuable or more precious than you. I don't need to know your ideology, your political party identification, or your religion to know the truth about who you are. My real goal is I want everyone to know how profound they are. I want everyone to know their dignity. I want everyone to see the truth of who they are. The best way to do that is stand with them when they're suffering. That is the best way to teach somebody their value, is to stand with them when they're suffering. And the CCP is grounding people groups down. And I want those people to know their dignity. I don't need to know their religion. I don't need to know their ideologies. I already know who they are. And that is another reason why I feel compelled to stand with the vulnerable, because I want them never to forget who they are.
I guess just last question. Again, we're here at this protest calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational terrorist organization. And of course, coming up pretty soon, we're going to have the Stop the Steal rally on Saturday, some of the same organizers here. What do you think these 2 points have in relation to each other, and what brings you here? What made you come out here to be part of this?
Well, if I thought that this election was stolen by labor unions in Philly, I wouldn't be here. I do believe there's clear evidence of the meddling of the CCP. I am here, but I'll tell you the reason I'm really here today is not so much me. It's my posterity, and it's the Uyghur in those camps today. The destiny of the Uyghur and those other minority groups and my co-religionists, they just arrested the most prominent lay Catholic in Hong Kong. It's a bold regime.
Yeah, that was Jimmy Lai. Right?
Yeah. It's a beautiful human being, a beautiful man. Our posterity have a shared future, and we have to ask ourselves. People ask me, what would you call this age? I think it is a new axial age, and that we're going to decide what is at the other end. And I want a culture of life and a civilization of love. And the children in East Turkestan and the children in my home in Kapolei, Hawaii, their destiny is together. So I'm here for them. I'm here for my posterity, and I'm here for the oppressed people in East Turkestan.
Hey, Jason, it's a real pleasure on the show.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, one more interview that I'm going to eat. Oh, I thought you guys left without me.
Yeah, so folks, we're here again at the rally to call for the designation of the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. Some great folks out here. We have a few others we're going to get on the camera now in just a bit, talking about what is happening in China right now and why people should care about this. Yeah, so sir, real pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you have a picture here of your brother, correct? Why don't you tell us first your name, sir?
Yeah, my name is Aziz Sulaiman. I'm Uyghur American. I'm an epidemiologist.
Turn it a bit more towards this.
Yes, I'm an epidemiologist. So today, on this International Human Rights Day, we came in front of Capitol building to protest. As we are speaking, like we said, millions of innocent Uyghur people are being tortured and forced to denounce their belief, religion, and forced to denounce their ethnic identity. Now, so today I think we are a very successful protest and a lot of speech, so I'm very excited.
So why don't you tell us about this picture you're holding?
Yeah, so among those millions of innocent Uyghur people, my brother was also taken by the Chinese authorities at the end of June 2016, and he was locked up in one of the concentration camps. And when I called my mom, China said he was infected with a virus called religious belief. So he was taken to the concentration camps. And then after a couple of months later, my mother and my sisters were threatened not to contact with me. So it's been more than 4 years, and I don't know what happened to my mother and my other sisters.
So he was arrested just for his religious belief?
Yeah, and my brother is actually a very skillful dentist. His name is Alim Sulaiman, and he is a law-abiding citizen. He never done any crime against Chinese government. But because of his belief, he was taken and then said free education. Now, just 2 months ago, after 4 years later, I found out that he was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment without any trial.
Wait, so he was given 17 years in prison in China because of his religious belief without a trial?
Yeah. So I can't believe this, but it's happening. So not only my brother, there are other millions of Uyghur people just because of their ethnic identity, their belief. Even those Uyghur people who are Communist Party members, they also are locked up in the concentration camps. So this is the excuse, I believe, but China want to exterminate Uyghur people. And because we are the owner of the land called East Turkestan.
Now, if you were to tell people one thing about your brother, about what's happening right now, what would you tell him?
Well, I'll tell him now in the concentration camps, there are millions of Uyghur people being tortured and waiting for to be slaughtered by the communist Chinese authorities, especially organ harvesting. Now I'm holding my brother's picture here, but I tell my Uyghur brothers and sisters in the concentration camps and all over the world that now activists, political activists, human rights activists, journalists are being voice of those voiceless Uyghur people. And if we stand together like this and work hard, eventually those innocent Uyghur people will be relieved from the evil regime of the Communist Chinese Party.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure.
Very much.
Real pleasure having the show. Thank you.
Voiceless people. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Now, folks, again, we're here at the rally to call for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization. One of the organizers with this is the Stop the Steal rally, which is going to be happening on Saturday in Washington, D.C. and in other parts of the U.S. And, folks, that said, join us again on Saturday. We're going to be broadcasting live from that rally. Thank you.
It's not just that we're out here voicing our opinions for us. We're out here voicing our opinions for all Americans, because Americans deserve a free and fair election.
Over. And those people that are telling you right now that it is over are lying to you.
We're not guided by your governor. We're not guided by your Secretary of State. We're not guided by Joe Biden. We're not guided by the New York Times. And we're not guided by all those stations that call the election. You know what we're guided by? The Constitution of the United States.
Extremely gutsy. The Chinese Communist Party is not known for taking criticism very well.
The police have blocked off the streets and been firing tear gas and beanbag rounds at the protesters, and they've made several arrests.
警方呢是一直进行了一些推进，并且呢是多次舉起黑旗和橙旗呢，去發射了很多的催淚彈。
即係佢哋放催淚彈嗰時，嘭咁撞到個肚㗎。咁咧就我而家翻轉頭咧見到個咁嘅嘢，因為嗰時兵荒馬亂咧，我就。
That's the media liaison. They're telling us that we need to get out of here. They're telling the press to leave.
Boy, this tear gas is getting pretty strong.